A blockbuster that shaped a nation. A failed ride concept that lasted only 2 months. A sequel that was so much more than just a theme park ride. This is the story of the Jaws ride at Universal Studios Florida. Author Peter Benchley put the terrors of the ocean to paper in his 1974 best-selling novel, Jaws. The following year, rising filmmaker Steven Spielberg adapted the thriller for the silver screen. Audiences were hooked. Jaws was as big as a hit as the film's 25-foot monstrous shark. Jaws earned the distinction of being the first summer blockbuster, earning $470 million worldwide. But its impact rippled beyond the movie-going experience. Audiences would never view the open waters in the same way again. In 1976, Universal Studios brought Jaws Frenzy to Hollywood with an addition to its studio tour, the Jaws Experience. The short show scene passes by the waters of Amity Island as a massive shark animatronic lunges at the tram. Parkgoers could even pose with a hanging shark photo op. The Jaws Experience brought movie magic to life in an exciting way for Universal Studios. As the studio tour grew, so did Universal's ambitions as a theme park, and none other than Steven Spielberg was also along for the ride. By the mid-80s, Universal Studios began producing a new tram tour to be built in a promising tourist destination, Orlando, Florida. However, once Disney caught on to Universal's plans, the not-so-mousy theme park giant began development on a movie studio theme park to be named Disney MGM Studios. The competition pushed Universal Studios to create bigger attractions beyond a tram tour. The park was becoming a large-scale project with several e-ticket rides, a tall order for Universal Studios. The development team was spread thin with enormous engineering and creative challenges ahead, none more challenging than a fully realized version of the Jaws Experience. On paper, a Jaws ride was a perfect fit for the upcoming Universal Studios Florida. A movie theme park wouldn't be complete without a blockbuster franchise, especially a thriller considering Universal's horror roots. Development for Jaws the Adventure, simplified to Jaws, began in 1987 with an estimated budget of $20 million. This was a massive budget compared to previous investments. Universal Studios had never built a single attraction on this scale. The boat ride was planned to have underwater animatronic sharks. Infamously, the shark animatronics for the Jaws film were mechanically problematic when in saltwater. Turning the book into a movie was a nightmare in itself. Turning the movie into a theme park ride was, well, we'll get into it. Even with Steven Spielberg on as a creative consultant, Universal needed outside help with Jaws. Industry legend Bob Gurr has hinted he was offered the opportunity. Gurr had quote-unquote no reluctance to decline the job despite his previous experience on major Universal Studios projects, citing it was quote-unquote too risky. The job instead went to Ride and Show Engineering. The firm not only had a good track record with Universal Studios, having previously worked on complicated attractions like Earthquake, but also won the bid by proving they could build shark animatronics that could operate underwater. Ride and Show Engineering would be responsible for the technical aspects of Jaws, such as the ride system and robot sharks. The ride was developed in partnership with MCA's Planning and Development Department, headed creatively by Peter Alexander. Jaws, similar to Disney's Jungle Cruise, was going to be a boat ride headed by a live skipper spieling a script. In concept, the unsuspecting boat tour would come across several shark attacks. An early draft even had a blatant jab at Disney with a pair of floating Mickey ears among wreckage in the water, a gag later used on Jurassic Park the Ride. One scene in an early draft of the ride took place in a boathouse, a concept by Tom Reidenbach. It originally implied an unseen Jaws that bumped into a ship from where a dead sailor's body fell out of a hole. The concept was coming together, but the story needed an impactful scene halfway through. A show-stopping moment like completely sinking the boat would be unforgettable, but not realistic to actually build for the ride. Instead, the idea came about to have Jaws attack the boat and pop it. The concept of Orlando's Jaws ride was becoming much more advanced than Hollywood's, and certainly more serious than its old carrot-toothed Bruce. Florida's Jaws ride was a technical feat, reaching a cost of $30 million, among the most expensive attractions in the park. It took 850 feet of track, 2,000 miles of electrical wire, and 7,500 tons of steel to build the ride. It was impressive, but many involved were losing confidence in its reliability. Major effects were failing to work repeatedly. The manufacturer and Universal worked long hours to resolve these issues as the park's opening day neared. They cycled the ride countless times making adjustments, but it still couldn't perform reliably. The ride couldn't even run at full capacity with executives and Spielberg on board. During tests, someone in management commented how the ride needed some work. Spielberg allegedly replied with something to the extent of, quote, "You're gonna have to do a lot more than that," unquote, implying the ride needed heavy creative improvements. The large design and its troublesome elements made it a quote-unquote engineering nightmare, in the words of an anonymous former MCA executive. Some from Ride and Show Engineering saw Jaws as a flawed concept, but development continued. Disappointment was brewing. Out of all the ride's early issues, the worst was its tight deadline. Opening day was getting closer and closer. Universal Studios Florida was originally set to open in 1989, but the park's debut was pushed back to 1990 because of its state-of-the-art lineup and significant workload. Anticipation was growing as elaborate advertisements for the park were popping up, including a 3D Jaws billboard sculpted by Michael Davey. Even with a year delay, the park still probably opened too early, but the show must go on. For a movie theme park filled with blockbusters, Universal Studios Florida's debut was anything but. The $600 million theme park opened to the public on Thursday, June 7, 1990. A day marked with extreme technical issues and thousands of disappointed guests. A power outage and operational complications affected the park's major attractions, including Confrontation, Earthquake the Big One, and especially Jaws. Jaws was closed throughout most of the day. Park personnel publicly blamed its closure on possible lightning in the area, despite beautiful weather. In the following days, Confrontation and Earthquake were operationally reduced to technical rehearsals. Jaws, however, was fully closed for maintenance, reopening for technical rehearsals that weekend. The limited Jaws was met with a generally positive reception despite a number of effects not working. With so many effects missing, some skippers reportedly improvised with reactions like, quote, "Imagine explosions over there," unquote. Jaws wasn't perfect yet, but at least it was open. To experience Jaws, guests entered a real-life Amity Island. This Amity Island, set in the timeline of the movie, celebrated the 4th of July year-round, giving it a spirited, energetic feel across the Midway. The coastal town had a quaint, believable look to it, almost as if you could smell a salty ocean breeze. Its white picket fence, happy-go-lucky feel lulled guests into a false sense of security as a terror dwelled beyond the shores ahead. The town led to a photo op of Bruce the Shark hanging on display right in front of the ride's entrance. Inside, the queue spanned 3 boathouse-like buildings with props and decorations sourced from northeastern fishing communities. The ride's 7-acre, 5-million-gallon lagoon wrapped around a central island. Its charming New England-style buildings hid the ride's large equipment, such as its water filtration system. The convincingly themed environment made the open-air ride even more believable. Guests boarded large inflatable pontoon cruisers that looked intentionally flimsy as part of the story. Piloting each boat were live onboard skippers, playing an even bigger role. The scenic tour to Lighthouse Cove was accompanied by a condensed version of John Williams' iconic soundtrack. The attraction began by cruising by Quint's shack with the Orca boat docked outside. Riders clearly overheard an argument from Quint discussing how the hanging shark outside wasn't their shark. The skipper reassured riders the waters were safe as the nonchalant tour moved along. A radio transmission from another boat in distress interrupted the tour, instantly dragging down the ride's upbeat tone. Around the bend, guests witnessed a tour boat just like theirs sinking bow first into the lagoon, with no survivors. Terror struck as a fin emerged from the water, prowling for the next victim before dipping back under the surface. The massive shark reappeared on the starboard side of the pontoon. The panicked skipper grabbed a grenade launcher, shooting and missing the shark a few times. After a back and forth with the chief over the radio, the skipper navigated into a nearby boathouse for safety. The sign on the building read Jay's Boathouse as a reference to Jay Stein, president of Universal Studios Florida. This dark indoor scene was a break from the Florida sun, but not from the shark. The giant great white broke into the boathouse, and riders got their first full glimpse of the shark and its vicious teeth. A highly articulate Jaws animatronic darted at the pontoon in the dim, eerie boathouse. The ride's final two scenes were its most ambitious. After escaping the boathouse, the tour boat was still being hunted, but the shark was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, the shark lunged out of the open water, attacked the flimsy pontoon boat, and dragged it across the lagoon. This terrifying scene worked with a turntable system that rotated in sync with the thrashing animatronic shark. The tour struggled onward as the menacing fin resurfaced, swam toward the boat, dove underneath, and bumped it. Jaws came back for one final scare. The shark charged out of the water with its mouth ready to attack the boat. The skipper shot another grenade, landing directly in the shark's mouth. Jaws swam back underwater. The delayed grenade went off, blowing up the savage shark, similar to the end of Spielberg's 1975 film. After this scene, the boat returned back at the dock to drop guests off. The ride's explosive climax was made possible with a contraption called the Meat Machine, created by producer Craig Barr and fabricated by TRA Architects. The effect launched water and rubber shark chunks into the sky, simulating an underwater explosion. It then spurted red dye into the water, which was diffused right after. The pieces would catch into a net system and funnel down to reset the effect for the next boat. From a guest perspective, Jaws was a well-received ride. It left riders screaming, cheering, and laughing along the action-packed journey, complete with a good payoff at the end. It was an ambitious ride, but that ambition was also the cause of its major issues and malfunctions. In the early days of Universal Studios Florida, Jaws was often closed. The ride would typically operate only for a few hours on a regular day before going down for maintenance, if the ride were even open that day to begin with.
The shark is not working. The shark is not working. Repeat, the shark is not working.
Maintenance crews worked on the attraction over many nights to make it operational for the next day. The underwater mechanisms caused frequent issues. After a bit, Universal Studios Florida stopped promoting the ride to avoid disappointment. One of the leading causes of the ride's problems was the attack scene. The turntable effect had two synchronized elements, the boat and the shark, which moved independently. This effect relied on accurate timing by the skipper, which happened inconsistently. The boat and the shark in that case would not connect, causing a very awkward and anticlimactic scene at best. Plus, the precision of multiple moving parts was made more complicated with the resistance of water. The animatronic also had real shark teeth, which fell out if bumped by the boat. People are afraid of shark teeth, not gums. This not only made the shark look silly, but the bumps also could have damaged the boat. The low success rate of this effect was only part of the issue. Park executives were well aware of the ride's pitfalls and were quick to consider possible adjustments. Leadership, including Steven Spielberg, rode Jaws to evaluate what repairs were needed. In case it hasn't been obvious, it was a lot. Jaws had been nearly inoperable, limping along with its lingering issues. Universal Studios Florida, following its rough opening day, had been able to sort out technical issues at other major attractions, such as Confrontation and Earthquake. Jaws, however, had too many complicated issues to overcome. The inevitable happened on August 22, 1990, just over 2 months after opening. Universal Studios Florida closed its anchor attraction, Jaws. The ride was shuttered for further evaluation and repairs. Lawsuits for a ride this problematic were inevitable. The first lawsuit happened while the ride was in operation. A 39-year-old guest fell into the water after his lap bar allegedly broke. The lagoon was fairly shallow in most areas, except for the deep pits for the animatronic sharks. Unfortunately, that was where the guest fell. The skipper reacted quickly by pressing the emergency stop button, which immediately shut down the ride and its effects. The guest was pulled back into the boat with no serious injuries. The numerous reports of this incident tell inconsistent details about what happened, some stating the other guest thought it was all part of the show. After the incident, the guest sued Universal Studios for $1 million, claiming negligence and poor maintenance. The other lawsuit came after the ride closed. Universal Studios Florida took a huge loss by pulling the plug on Jaws. It was a $30 million investment, plus the millions of additional dollars it would take to get it properly up and running. So, Universal Studios opened a 40-page lawsuit against the ride's manufacturer, Ride and Show Engineering. Universal claimed poor workmanship and a defective design, such as underwater animatronics that were not fully waterproof. The manufacturer defended that the park rushed development. The unrealistic deadlines resulted in key effects not being tested underwater before being installed on the ride. Having enough time to test prior to installation may have prevented malfunctions. Universal Studios allegedly mixed clay into the Jaws lagoon to make the water murky and hide the underwater mechanisms. However, the clay caused complications to the underwater equipment. The chief executive of Ride and Show Engineering commented that Universal Studios wasn't experienced enough to properly maintain the ride. The two sides settled out of court in April 1991.
Sign it, Larry.
Universal Studios moved forward. Real quick, thank you. If you're enjoying so far, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Storybook Amusement. After closing Jaws in 1990, Universal Studios had hopes to make the failed ride operational. The ride wouldn't be rethemed nor replaced. Universal was confident they could make it work. Universal hired third-party consultants for a, quote, redesign that would lead to the re-engineering, rebuilding, and reopening of Jaws in 1991, unquote. The plan was more or less to automate the boats and strengthen the mechanical structures. The assessment, however, determined the repairs were more complicated than that. The ride needed more than a moderate refurbishment. A major finding was that the attraction developed weld cracks at the base of key framework structures for the ride and its effects. This made the attraction prone to failure, such as potentially causing a catastrophic accident. The lagoon was immediately drained at this time, and an extensive overhaul was deemed necessary. The poor state of the ride pushed its reopening out to 1992 at the soonest, but even that was too optimistic. The reopening was delayed to 1993. Universal made use of the Jaws queue while the attraction was closed to guests. The Jaws queue was the venue for a haunted house during the seasonal event that would eventually become Halloween Horror Nights. The space at one point was even used as a temporary barbecue restaurant.
A what?
Meanwhile, Universal Studios Florida opened Back to the Future the ride in 1991. Unlike the struggles of the park's opening day, the debut of Back to the Future went over smoothly. Universal wanted the reopening of Jaws to go swimmingly as well, assuring everything was done right this time. Reopening Jaws was going to be the final missing piece from opening day. Universal scrapped the former Jaws ride system and effects, except the basic lagoon structure and theme sets. The old boats were sold to MGM Grand Adventures, a theme park in Las Vegas, for its backlot river tour. After losing millions on its investment, Universal took this time to evaluate the creative and engineering aspects of the attraction. On the creative side, Universal worked on a more engaging script for skippers. The spiel for the original Jaws ride was somewhat reactionary with rudimentary lines. Peter Alexander tweaked the story to be more captivating, also incorporating new scenes to replace the old defective effects. For a more reliable ride, this version of Jaws wouldn't have the boat attack scene or the meat machine. Adam Bezark took over during development to oversee production. Jay Stein, president of Universal Studios Florida, also put a lot of care into the redesign as it was one of his final projects in the park before retiring. Universal partnered with several contractors on the redesign of Jaws. The Totally Fun Company, having worked on prior Universal Studios attractions, served as the executive producer on the redesign. Eastport International Inc., soon acquired by Oceaneering Entertainment Systems, created the new shark animatronics. The company specialized in deep-sea robotic submarines, so the new animatronics could handle being underwater. The company crafted 7 fiberglass, latex skin, and steel sharks, which were as powerful as the liftoff of a Boeing 737 airliner. The sharks, attached to 12-ton hydraulic lifts, were carefully designed to forcefully and safely lunge through the resistance of water. The show sets were built by the Nazzle Company, with previous work on Universal Studios Florida projects such as the Psycho House and Bates Motel. Regal Marine Industries fabricated the new boats. The track and motion-based ride system were manufactured by Intamin, which made the simulators for Back to the Future the Ride and many roller coasters. iTech Entertainment developed the ride control system, including the programming of movements and triggers. After completely overhauling the ride, the combined cost of the two versions of Jaws jumped to an estimated $70 million. Needless to say, this was a massive investment, and it had to work this time around. The ride's creators cycled the ride day and night to fine-tune every detail. Even if they were making minor tweaks to a single scene, they had to complete the entire layout since the ride vehicles couldn't move in reverse. It was a long, tedious process getting the complex ride up and running to Universal's standards. Shortly after the skippers started training, Jaws was officially in technical rehearsals by August 1993, 3 years after its original opening. Universal was more patient this time around as technical rehearsals lasted for months. 500,000 guests rode Jaws during technical rehearsals. To generate buzz leading up to the ride's reopening, Universal Studios had a 30-foot tall, 30-foot long land shark vehicle that made 300 promotional tour appearances. Universal Studios had some positive years after fumbling its grand opening. The theme park rehabbed its image, and a functional Jaws ride would really be the cherry on top. Jaws resurfaced at Universal Studios Florida on October 1st, 1993, with an opening ceremony featuring Spielberg and some of the original film stars. The experience started off the same way as before. Guests passed through the Amity Island area, celebrating the 4th of July. The festive town circle still led to a hanging shark photo op, where countless families made memories for decades. According to the backstory, this was the quote-unquote real Amity Island. Spielberg's blockbuster film was just an overblown retelling of the town's infamous shark attacks from 1974. Amity's tourism fell on some economic hard times after that incident, but the best and only Captain Jake's Amity Boat Tours was turning that around. The Jaws queue went through the rustic boathouses of Captain Jake's Amity Boat Tours with nautical decorations and some authentic props from the movie, like Chief Brody's jacket. In the queue, a 50-minute video played local programming called Hey There Amity. The channel played ads for Amity's local businesses, plus Ocean Spray, an early sponsor of the ride. The video also had some talk show segments with the quote-unquote real-life counterparts of the Jaws characters. The real Mayor Vaughn was denying shark incidents, the real Hooper was defensive about his portrayal in the movie, and someone claiming to be Quint said he survived the attack. At the dock, guests boarded tour boats with tiered rows, seating up to 48 passengers. The new diesel-powered boats appeared sturdier than the original pontoon boats, now with automated movements. The live onboard skipper had no actual control over the boat other than e-stops, only pretending to steer and pilot. Skippers were now much more involved in the story. The reimagined Jaws ride, though heavily re-engineered, had a very similar format to the original. It was still in a massive 7-acre lagoon, holding 5 million gallons of water. The lagoon still had a central island, with lifelike New England building facades to sell the small seaside town atmosphere. The widespread and believable environment made the attraction feel secluded from the world. The ride was a tour around the real Amity Island to visit the locations of the infamous shark attacks of 1974 that inspired the 1975 film. A voice over the radio from Amity Base, voiced by the ride's show director, gave the boat the all clear.
This is base. You're cleared for departure, Amity 6.
The ride started with a cue from its soundtrack, composed by David Newper and based on John Williams' melodies, as the skipper and riders waved goodbye to all the landlubbers waiting on the dock. In the new version of the ride, the skipper introduced the tour and pointed out Chief Brody's home across the lagoon. The first few scenes of the reimagined ride were fairly similar to the previous version, except without Quint's heated discussion. A distress call from another boat played over the radio, and the tour continued around the lighthouse only to discover a sinking boat. A fin popped up by the wreckage, went under the boat, and resurfaced on the starboard side. The tension was rising on the open water, with a 25-foot shark stalking the boat. After a call from base, the skipper grabbed the grenade launcher, which was definitely not over the top at all, and shot at the shark twice before going to hide in a nearby boathouse, where the orca was docked. Once in the dark, cool boathouse, the skipper shut off the engine. The off-putting silence gave the foggy scene an eerie feel, with ambient dripping sound effects and an ominous glow from the water. It was a cinematic moment. The skittish skipper swiveled the boat's light around at each bump and bang heard in the claustrophobic boathouse. The scene had improved effects, with boats and cargo knocking around as the shark was trying to barge its way inside. Jaws crashed in and charged at the boat, probably the most tense moment of the ride. The skipper finally got the boat to restart and rushed out of the boathouse. The next scenes were completely different from the original version. No more shark attack or meat machine. Back on the open water, the shark was nowhere to be found. Chief Brody called in saying he'll be there in 10 minutes. The skipper reacted with one of the most iconic lines from the ride.
10 minutes? We're gonna be shark bait in 10 minutes!
The shark charged at the boat. The skipper tried shooting it but missed, causing the gas dock on the shore to explode. Large equipment fell over, a barrel rocketed into the sky, and the lagoon went up in flames. There was no way out. This scene was hot. Some guests complained this scene burned their skin, but it could have just been discomfort from sunburns combined with the heat. In development, the creators cranked up the flame effect until it was painful and dialed it just below that extreme level. The skipper carried on, escaping through the fire that dissipated just in time for the boat to pass. This was the home stretch. The skipper headed toward the dock where everyone could evacuate. However, Jaws was still on the hunt. Its fins surfaced and rushed toward the boat, disappearing into the wake. Just as the boat stopped near a high-voltage barge, the shark attacked once more, accidentally swimming into an electrical cable with its mouth. Sparks and steam shot up, and the shark went under. It floated back to the surface, completely fried from the voltage, just like the electric ending of Jaws 2. The shark was dead, giving off a burnt smell. Everyone on board made it out alive, and the skipper triumphantly screamed,
Call out those Marines. Cause we're going home!
It's the best thing I've seen yet.
Very beautiful, very nice.
This one screamed all the way through. Oh man, it was fabulous.
It was fun!
The return of Jaws was well received by guests. This version of the ride was a bit more clever and resonated with parkgoers. It would even grow a devoted fan base over the coming years. Simply put, the new and improved Jaws was exciting. The boat's motion base was intense, and the ride didn't hold back on giant animatronic sharks. The unpredictability of being outdoors on the water gave it an expansive, real feeling, with the uneasiness of not knowing what was under the surface. On a ride like Confrontation, King Kong was out in the open seen from far away, but Jaws could pop out from anywhere in the lagoon. No other ride could replicate the uncontrollable, secluded tension Jaws had. Plus, night rides were a bonus. The improved Jaws ride did exactly what Universal wanted it to do. It was reliable, unlike the original version. Most guests could actually get on and experience Jaws for themselves. Having Jaws back at Universal Studios felt right, but even though the new Jaws ride was a huge improvement over the old version, it still had its fair share of issues. Some of the ride's issues were very simple and out of the park's control. Obviously, being an outdoor ride, Jaws was prone to weather delays, and Central Florida is known for its afternoon showers. The outdoor ride had other weird quirks like duck stops. As the story goes, a duck was in the lagoon one day, as is common during certain seasons, and was unfortunately on top of a special effect during the ride. The duck shot up and landed on a horrified guest. From then on, skippers were instructed to stop the ride if a duck were in danger. Oddities aside, Jaws also had more complex issues. For starters, the ride needed constant maintenance, but the water made work difficult. Some tasks required either certified scuba divers or draining the entire lagoon. The sharks could be raised above water level via lift platforms for convenient maintenance. The animatronics themselves were prone to breaking down. They weren't necessarily faulty like in the original version of the ride, but they were still tricky to keep fully operational. The shark skins were replaced biannually, and other components of the ride needed custom parts. Additionally, the animatronics occasionally leaked hydraulic fluid, which contaminated the lagoon water. In extreme situations, this turned the water lime green and stained some guests' clothes. These leaks, among other pollutants, affected local stormwater ponds when the lagoon was drained. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency received an anonymous tip about the issue, forcing Universal Studios to change its practices with the lagoon water. Universal switched to a more efficient hydraulic fluid for the animatronics, among other improvements for drainage. The ride actually closed every so often, about once per year, for deep maintenance. During those times, the entire lagoon was drained, and team members scraped sludge from the bottom to clean it. The intricate Jaws was also expensive to operate, from staffing needs to regular maintenance to costly resources. Every ride vehicle had a spieling team member on board, costing slightly more than the staffing of typical attractions. The explosion effect reportedly cost around $2 million annually in natural gas. The boats ran on diesel fuel, which added to the ride's expenses. That cost went up even more when Universal Orlando switched to a more environmentally friendly diesel. Speaking of fuel prices, the cost of gas skyrocketed in 2005 following Hurricane Katrina. Universal Orlando, which was struggling in attendance at this time, temporarily closed Jaws to save on rising fuel costs. The ride operated seasonally, but after overwhelming guest complaints, the attraction reopened in 2006. Jaws across the years had many ups and downs. The failed original version, the popularity of the second, the mechanical issues, the loyal fans, the cost, and so on. Jaws was now well over a decade into operation and outlasted other opening day attractions like Confrontation and Nickelodeon Studios. Universal Studios was a very different park by this point. It was no secret that complicated Jaws couldn't last forever. The tides were changing at Universal Orlando Resort. Next door at Islands of Adventure, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter was a smash success when it opened in 2010. It was only a matter of time before Universal Studios Florida had its own Wizarding World as well. In late 2011, Universal Orlando Resort announced Jaws would soon close permanently to make room for a Wizarding World expansion. Many guests complained against the beloved ride's closure, but it was a done deal. Fans showed up for Jaws' final day of operation on January 2nd, 2012, with a line reaching nearly 90 minutes at its peak. The emotional day ended with the late Michael "Skip" Skipper behind the helm for Jaws' final public ride, followed by a lap just for the closing team. In true Jaws fashion, the final rides were passionate and high energy. Riders screamed the iconic lines, cheered the whole way through, and of course, the kill shark animatronic was out of commission. That was Jaws. Exciting, personable, and unpredictable. The Wizarding World of Harry Potter Diagon Alley opened in place of Jaws and Amity Island on July 15, 2014. Even without Jaws, Universal Studios Florida still has a few remnants and Easter eggs from the classic ride. Whether it's a nod to Spielberg's 1975 film, or the famous Bruce the Shark on display in San Francisco. It's also been said the fire-breathing dragon in Diagon Alley uses the same utility connection as the gas dock explosion. It's certainly in the same area. Jaws is missed in Orlando, but it is still featured on the studio tour in Hollywood, and since 2001 has operated at Universal Studios Japan. Back in Florida, Jaws left behind a storied reputation. It was one of the most celebrated attractions not just in Universal's history, but in all of theme park history. The redesign lasted well beyond its years despite issues. It was almost doomed to fail, but instead thrilled guests for years. A lot of that success can be credited to the ride's design. Sharks are always scary, and nothing beats the up-close and personal feeling of seeing a giant animatronic shark trying to attack you. It's a major reason why so many people are fascinated and unnerved by the idea of submechanophobia. But the real reason this ride stayed so relevant for so long were the skippers. They put their heart and soul into every single show to make sure everyone had a great time. They cared about the attraction, its story, and its significance. Without the personal touch of skippers, Jaws would have just been a lap around the lagoon with some animatronics. Their timing and effort made the ride feel believable, and they made a connection with guests in just 5 short minutes. That's an experience worth doing again and again.
Amity, as you know, means friendship.
Rides like Jaws are almost impossible to come by nowadays. Human-led experiences are becoming more and more rare, with attractions like the Great Movie Ride and Poseidon's Fury closing their doors forever. Nothing is quite as special as Jaws was. Experiences like Shark in the Dark night rides at Halloween Horror Nights were legendary, and that's just one of a million reasons why Jaws is still adored all these years later. Fans and skippers alike still celebrate the ride, and Universal Studios has honored the franchise with tribute stores, entertainment offerings, and more. The blockbuster, the ride, and the memories. Jaws undoubtedly made waves in theme park history. Special thanks to those who have covered this topic. This video wouldn't have been possible without the book Adventures in Amity: Tales from the Jaws Ride by Dustin McNeil. I can't recommend it enough. And special thanks to all the Storybook Amusement patrons. Shout out to the producer credits Parallel Discover and Nick E. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you'd like to see more. For exclusive content, join the Storybook Amusement Patreon today for as little as $1 per month at patreon.com/storybookamusement. Find the article version of this video and Storybook Amusement merch at storybookamusement.com. This channel is not sponsored, so your support really helps produce videos like this one. Thanks everyone for watching.